The heavy iron gates of the prison creaked open, casting an eerie shadow on the cold stone floor. Boethius, once a man of high honor and influence, now found himself shackled and alone, his fate sealed by the whims of those he once served. The weight of his chains felt heavier with each step, but it was the weight of his thoughts that bore down on him the most. How could it all have gone so wrong? Just a few months ago, he was a consul, a man whose words could move empires. Now he was accused of treason, his name dragged through the mud, and his life reduced to this dark cell. He had always believed in the good, in the order of the universe, and in the divine plan that guided all things. But as he sat in the darkness, the only light coming from the small barred window high above, his faith wavered. It was in this moment of despair that philosophy appeared, not as a person, but as a presence, a voice that seemed to whisper through the cold air. "Why do you waste your time in sorrow, Boethius?" the voice asked. "Do you think that fortune has abandoned you?" Boethius looked around, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. "Fortune has turned against me," he replied, his voice hoarse. "I have been stripped of everything: my position, my wealth, my dignity. What is there left for me?" Philosophy's presence was calm, almost serene. "Fortune, my friend, is fickle. She gives and takes as she pleases, but she is not the true measure of a man's worth. Look deeper, beyond the surface of things, and you will find that the highest good remains unchanged." Boethius frowned, his mind struggling to grasp the meaning. "The highest good, what do you mean by that?" "Think of the things you once valued: self-sufficiency, esteem, power, renown, and delight. These things seemed important, didn't they? But they are like gifts of fortune, not of character. They can be taken away as easily as they were given. The highest good, the true measure of a man, lies in something more profound, something eternal." Boethius shook his head, his thoughts a whirlwind of confusion. "I don't understand. How can I find this highest good when everything around me seems to be falling apart?" Philosophy's voice grew softer, almost soothing. "Imagine a world where everything is in perfect order, where every part fits together in a divine plan. In this world, the highest good is the center, the unchanging essence of all that is true and beautiful. It is the source of all things, and it is one with the God of the philosophers." Boethius's eyes widened. "God? Are you saying that God is the highest good?" "Indeed," philosophy replied. "The highest good is the ultimate goal, the perfection that all things strive to reach. Even the things you once valued: self-sufficiency, esteem, power, renown, and delight, are mere reflections of this highest good. They are not ends in themselves, but aspects of the divine." Boethius thought for a moment, his mind slowly beginning to grasp the idea. "But if the highest good is one with God, and God is the source of all things, how can evil exist? Why do bad things happen to good people?" Philosophy's voice was patient. "That is a question that has puzzled many, but consider this: all things, animate and inanimate, strive for the good. They seek to preserve their existence and realize their nature. Even inanimate objects, like heavy objects that fall or flames that rise, are following the natural order. This order, this design, is a reflection of the divine plan. Evil, in this sense, is not a thing but a lack of the good. It is a deviation from the perfect order, a shadow cast by the light of the highest good." Boethius was beginning to see a glimmer of hope, a light in the darkness. "So, even in my darkest hour, the highest good still exists, and I can still strive for it." "Exactly," philosophy said. "The highest good is the goal, the ultimate purpose of all things. When you understand this, you will see that your current suffering is not the end but a part of the journey. You must not look back, not cling to the false values that have led you to this point. Instead, you must look forward, toward the light of eternal truth." Boethius took a deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity he had not felt in a long time. "I will try," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I will not look back. I will find the highest good, and in doing so I will find my true self." Philosophy's presence faded, but the words remained echoing in Boethius's mind. The journey ahead would be difficult, but he was no longer alone. The path to the highest good was clear, and he was ready to take the first step. In the heart of the book, Boethius finds himself in a deep conversation with philosophy. He is puzzled by the idea of free will, and how it fits with the concept of divine foreknowledge. If God knows everything that will happen, how can humans truly have free will? Philosophy takes on this challenge. explaining that human freedom and divine foreknowledge can coexist. Philosophy starts by saying that humans are free to make choices. We can decide to do good or bad things, and these choices are not bound by a chain of causes. She argues that our freedom is most evident when we use our reason to make moral choices. When we follow the path of goodness, we are truly free and acting in harmony with the divine. On the other hand, when we give in to bad desires, we become slaves to our own passions, losing our true freedom. Boethius is still not convinced. He asks, if God knows everything in advance, doesn't that mean we have no real choice? If God foresees that I will do something, then I must do it. How can I be held responsible for my actions if they are already determined? Philosophy replies by explaining that God's knowledge is different from human knowledge. God is eternal and sees everything in a timeless way. It's like God is watching a movie that shows all of history at once. Just because God sees what happens doesn't mean he causes it. It's like if someone sees you walking, they know you are walking, but they didn't make you walk. Similarly, God sees our choices as they happen, but he doesn't force us to make those choices. This idea helps Boethius understand that humans still have free will. We are free to choose, and God, who sees all, holds us responsible for those choices. Philosophy says, you act before the eyes of a judge who sees everything. This means that our actions are important, and we should strive to be good because we are accountable for our choices. But some scholars, like Joel Rilihan and John Marenban, think that Boethius's book has a hidden message. They believe that the book is a kind of satire, a playful way of saying that only Christianity can provide true comfort. They argue that Boethius, a Christian himself, used the form of a Menippean satire to show that pagan philosophy is limited, and that only Christianity can answer the big questions. However, many other scholars, like Danuta Schanzer, disagree. They think that Boethius was sincere in his use of philosophy, and that he didn't need to hide his Christian beliefs. Boethius was facing death and needed real comfort, not a clever puzzle. Philosophy in the book is not just a narrow type of reasoning, but a broader love of wisdom that includes poetry and music. This combination helps the reader see the world in a new way, even if they can't fully understand everything. Philosophy's main goal is to help Boethius see that life has meaning, and that there is a higher purpose. She doesn't promise all the answers, but she gives him hope. She tells him to have faith and to keep striving for what is good. Even if he doesn't fully understand everything, he can still find comfort in the idea that there is a higher power guiding the world. Throughout the book, Boethius and philosophy explore these ideas, and by the end, Boethius feels more at peace. He sees that even if he can't fully grasp the mysteries of the universe, he can still live a good and meaningful life. This is the true consolation of philosophy. The world in which Beowulf was written was one of change and upheaval. By the time the poem was composed, around the year 800, the Roman Empire had long since crumbled, and the lands it once controlled were now a patchwork of Germanic kingdom. In Britain, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes had settled, pushing the native Britons to the edges of the island. Christianity was spreading, but it existed alongside the old pagan beliefs, creating a unique blend of traditions. In this world, a poet, whose name we do not know, decided to tell a story about the past. This story, Beowulf, is set in a time long before, when the Danes and the Geats, two powerful tribes, ruled the lands of what are now Denmark and southern Sweden. The poet wanted to celebrate the heroism and wisdom of his ancestors, while also reflecting on the passage of time and the inevitability of loss. The poem begins with a call to attention, H-wheat, or listen. The poet is inviting us to step back in time, to a world where kings were mighty and warriors were fierce. The first character we meet is Scyld Seafing, a legendary figure who arrived on the shores of Denmark as a baby, alone in a boat filled with treasure. Scyld grows up to become a great king, conquering many tribes and earning the respect and loyalty of his people. When he dies, his warriors honor him by sending him out to sea in a boat loaded with wealth, just as he came. The story then jumps forward a few generations to Hrothgar, Scyld's great-grandson. Hrothgar is a powerful and generous king who builds a great mead hall called Hjura. This hall is more than just a building. It's a symbol of the community and the civilization the Danes have built. It's a place where warriors gather to drink, tell stories, and celebrate their victories. But this peace and prosperity are threatened by a monster named Grendel, who attacks the hall at night, killing and terrorizing the Danes. Enter Beowulf, a young warrior from the land of the Geats. Beowulf has heard of Hrothgar's troubles and decides to help. He travels to Denmark with a group of his own warriors, determined to defeat Grendel. When he arrives, he is welcomed by Hrothgar, who is grateful for the help. That night, Grendel attacks Heorot again, but this time Beowulf is ready. In a fierce battle, Beowulf tears off Grendel's arm, mortally wounding the monster. The next day, the Danes celebrate their victory, and Beowulf is hailed as a hero. But the story doesn't end there. Grendel's mother, enraged by her son's death, seeks revenge. She attacks Heorot, killing one of Hrothgar's closest friends. Beowulf, undaunted, follows her to her underwater lair and defeats her in a grueling battle. The Danes are once again safe, and Beowulf returns to his own land, where he eventually becomes king of the Geats. Years pass, and Beowulf grows old. One day, a dragon emerges from a hidden lair, angry because a thief has stolen a treasure from its hoard. The dragon begins to ravage the land, and Beowulf, despite his age, decides to face it. He goes into battle with a small group of warriors, but most of them flee in fear. Only one, a young warrior named Wiglaf, stays by Beowulf's side. Together, they fight the dragon, and though they succeed in killing it, Beowulf is mortally wounded. He dies, and the poem ends with his people mourning their loss and burying him with great honor. Throughout the poem, the poet weaves together themes of heroism, loyalty, and the inevitability of death. Beowulf is a warrior who embodies the ideals of his culture: courage, strength, and a willingness to protect his people at any cost. But the poet also shows us the dark side of this world, where violence and revenge are never far away, and even the greatest heroes must eventually face their end. The poem is a reflection on the past, a celebration of the values of a bygone age, and a reminder of the enduring human struggle between light and darkness. It speaks to us across the centuries, inviting us to ponder the nature of heroism and the complexities of the human condition. Beowulf may be an ancient story, but its themes are as relevant today as they were when it was first told. Hrothgar, the great king of the Danes, built a magnificent hall called Heorot. The name means stag, a symbol of royalty and strength. Hrothgar was a just and generous king, embodying the values of courage, loyalty, and honor. Heorot was a place of light and celebration, where men feasted, sang, and told stories of their ancestors. But the poet warns us that even the brightest halls can fall to darkness. He tells of a future burning of Heorot by the Heathobards, a neighboring tribe, and the bloodshed that follows. This theme of light and darkness, peace and violence, order and chaos, is central to the story. It shows that nothing lasts forever, and that even the strongest fortresses can be destroyed. One night, while the men of Heorot were feasting and rejoicing, a terrible creature named Grendel attacked. Grendel lived in the dark, marshy lands outside the hall, and was filled with hatred for the joy and light of the community. He was a descendant of Cain, the first murderer, and was cursed to live in exile. Grendel could not bear the sound of the harp and the songs of creation that filled Heorot. He attacked the hall, killing and dragging away many of Hrothgar's men. For 12 long years, Grendel terrorized Heorot, and Hrothgar, now old and weak, could do nothing to stop him. The once glorious hall was now a place of fear and sorrow, empty and dark after nightfall. But hope came from an unexpected place. Beowulf, a young warrior from the Geat people, heard of Grendel's terror and decided to help. Beowulf was a descendant of a man who had once been saved by Hrothgar, and he wanted to repay the debt. He gathered a group of warriors and sailed to Denmark. When they arrived, the watchman was impressed by their noble appearance and allowed them to pass. Beowulf and his men were welcomed by Hrothgar, who was filled with hope but also with doubt. Beowulf offered to fight Grendel in hand-to-hand combat, without weapons, just as Grendel fought. He believed that God would decide the outcome, but he also knew that fate would play its part. At the feast, a man named Unferth, one of Hrothgar's warriors, challenged Beowulf's bravery. Unferth spoke of a swimming contest Beowulf had once lost to a man named Breca, and doubted his ability to defeat Grendel. Beowulf responded by telling the story of his journey and his strength, and he reminded Unferth that Grendel had never faced a true warrior like himself. Hrothgar and his men were reassured, and the feast continued. When night fell, the king and his men left the hall, entrusting it to Beowulf and his warriors. Grendel, unaware of the new threat, approached the hall with evil intentions. He easily broke through the door and killed one of Beowulf's men. But when he tried to attack Beowulf, he found himself in a grip unlike any he had ever felt. Beowulf's strength was immense, and Grendel, filled with fear, tried to escape. The two fought fiercely, causing great damage to the hall. Beowulf's men tried to help, but their weapons could not harm Grendel. In the end, Beowulf used his bare hands to tear Grendel's arm from his body. Grendel fled, mortally wounded, leaving his arm behind. Beowulf nailed the arm to the roof of the hall as a sign of his victory. The next morning the Danes saw the arm and the damage to the hall. They were amazed and overjoyed. Hrothgar praised Beowulf and adopted him as a son, showering him with gifts. The hall was restored, and a great celebration was held in Beowulf's honor. But the poet reminds us that the joy was fleeting, and that the future held more challenges. Hrothgar's wife, Wealhtheow, was more cautious. She urged her husband to remember his own kin, and to ensure that their sons would inherit the throne. She also asked Beowulf to be a good mentor to her sons. Despite her warnings, the celebration continued, and the men drank and sang, unaware of the dangers that lay ahead. But Grendel's mother, another monster from the marshes, was determined to avenge her son. She attacked Heorot, killing Hrothgar's closest advisor, Aesir, and taking Grendel's arm. The Danes were shocked and frightened, but Beowulf was determined to face this new threat. He set off to find Grendel's mother, armed with a sword named Hrunting, which Unferth had given him. Hrothgar warned Beowulf of the dangers of the mere where the monster lived, but Beowulf was fearless. Beowulf dove into the dark waters, and was quickly attacked by Grendel's mother. She dragged him to her underwater lair, a grim and twisted version of Heorot. Beowulf fought with all his might, but Hrunting failed to harm the monster. She nearly killed him, but Beowulf found an ancient sword in the lair and used it to behead her. He also cut off Grendel's head, which he brought back to the surface as proof of his victory. The Danes, who had given up hope, were overjoyed to see Beowulf return alive. He presented the heads to Hrothgar and Wealhtheow, and the hall was once again a place of celebration and triumph. But the poet's warning remains: the joy of the moment is fragile, and the future is uncertain. The Hall of Heorot, once a symbol of light and strength, is always at risk from the darkness that lurks just beyond its walls. Beowulf's life was a tapestry of bravery, wisdom, and loyalty, woven with threads of both triumph and sorrow. As he lay on the brink of death, his mind drifted back through the years, from the vibrant days of his youth to the somber responsibilities of his old age. When Beowulf first arrived in Denmark, he was a young and fearsome warrior, ready to face the monstrous Grendel. He defeated Grendel and his mother, earning the gratitude of King Hrothgar and the admiration of all who heard his tale. Hrothgar, recognizing Beowulf's exceptional qualities, shared his own wisdom, warning Beowulf against the dangers of pride and greed. The old king spoke of Hermod, a once great leader who had fallen into tyranny, and urged Beowulf to remain humble and to remember that all earthly glory is fleeting. Years passed, and Beowulf returned to his homeland, the land of the Geats. He presented the treasures he had won to his king, Hygelac, who rewarded him with land and honor. Beowulf's loyalty to his uncle was unwavering, and he declined to take the throne when Hygelac was killed in battle. Instead, he supported the young Prince Herdred, only to lose him to the same fate. Finally, the throne fell to Beowulf, and he ruled the Geats with the same strength and wisdom he had shown in battle. For 50 years, Beowulf was a beloved and respected king. He kept his people safe and prosperous, but the wheel of fortune always turns. One day, a dragon, awakened by the theft of a golden cup, began to terrorize the land. Beowulf, though now an old man, could not stand idly by. He donned his armor and set out to face the dragon, knowing that his final battle was at hand. The fight was fierce. Beowulf's strength had waned with age, and his sword could not pierce the dragon's scales. His companions, all but one, fled in terror. Only Wiglaf, a young and loyal warrior, stood by his side. Together, they fought the dragon, and in a final, desperate effort, they defeated it. But the victory came at a great cost. The dragon's poison coursed through Beowulf's veins, and he knew his end was near. As he lay dying, Beowulf's thoughts turned to his people. He worried about their future without him, but he was at peace with his own fate. He had lived a life of honor and courage, and he had done everything in his power to protect his people. Wiglaf, the last of his kin, stood by his side, and Beowulf entrusted him with the task of leading the Geats. Beowulf's legacy was one of heroism and wisdom. He was a warrior who understood the value of loyalty, the importance of self-control, and the fleeting nature of earthly glory. In a world where violence and revenge were often the norm, Beowulf chose to be a defender of his people, a king who ruled with both strength and compassion. The story of Beowulf is a reminder that true heroism lies not just in the deeds we do, but in the choices we make and the values we live by. Beowulf may have been a mighty warrior, but his greatest strength was his unwavering commitment to the well-being of those he loved. In the end, his legacy lived on, a beacon of courage and wisdom for generations to come.